Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for Her Excellency, President of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Ms. Zalewak Zewde. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start off by acknowledging the presence of Her Excellency, President of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Ms. Zalewak Zewde, honorable ministers, esteemed colleagues, distinguished delegates, captains of industry, joining us from every corner of the globe, both in person and virtually. Welcome to the 2023 African Economic Conference. Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour et bienvenue à la Conférence économique africaine 2023. My name is Tanya Habimana. I'm an anchor at CNBC Africa. And for this opening ceremony, I will be your MC, guiding you as we gather the thoughts and insights from thought leaders, visionaries, converging under the theme, Imperatives for Sustainable Industrial Development in Africa. Together, we'll unpack the progress and opportunities that lie for Africa's industrial development. We'd like to invite you to take a seat as we proceed with the opening ceremony. Jointly organized by the African Development Bank, the Economic Commission for Africa, and the United Nations Development Programme, we'll unite and hear from policymakers, industrial experts, private sector visionaries, researchers, and my personal favorite, the fiery youth of Africa. So let us embark on this journey with the hope of illuminating the path to 2063, the Africa we want, and anchoring our resolutions in the Sustainable Development Goals. Without further ado, let's dive into the heart of the program with an opening video that captures our collective aspirations and the urgency of our mission.
Africa, a continent of boundless potential, blessed with abundant natural resources and a vibrant manufacturing sector. A youthful, determined labor force poised to turn Africa into a global powerhouse. Yet, the past few years have seen their share of trials. A global pandemic, economic shocks, conflicts, and financial downturns have hindered Africa's sustainable development progress. But in adversity lies opportunity. Now, more than ever, African countries must prioritize steady, inclusive economic growth for our continent.
Crucially, Africa needs critical skills and value chains not to be left behind in this new industrial revolution. Africa has to connect education and industry, learning and earning, while also establishing regulatory frameworks to protect the poor and to retain its talent. And it is critical today to step up investments in energy, infrastructure, and agro-industrial transformation to be able to achieve green industrialization.
Future-ready green industrialization is critical to enhance productivity, equip our workforce with invaluable skills, and form the bedrock of a more prosperous and equitable future for Africa. Welcome to Addis Ababa and the African Economic Conference 2023. Jointly organized by the African Development Bank, the Economic Commission for Africa, and the United Nations Development Programme, AEC 2023 is a platform for knowledge exchange and unlocking the potential of our industries.
The theme of this year's conference, the imperatives for sustainable industrial development in Africa, is both timely and critical, given the multiple and overlapping shocks faced by African countries in recent years, which has once again highlighted the need for us to rethink our development models.
I therefore appeal to all of you and the young researchers in our midst to think outside the box and propose concrete ideas for tackling the numerous investment constraints we face so that countries can access the kind of ambitious financing needed to accelerate Africa's inclusive industrialization and sustainable development.
Over the next 3 days, we will delve into sustainable industrialization through 4 key themes. We will explore several ways to create stronger regional value chains. We will then look at how we can integrate these into the global value chain. Next, we will examine the impact of industrialization on our habitat and environment. From green supply chains to renewable energy, we will tackle the challenges head-on, identifying financial hurdles and paving the way for sustainable development. We will discuss the important role the African Continental Free Trade Area can play in developing our value chains. Finally, we will deep dive into more inclusive industrialization for small and medium-sized industries. Together, we will unlock the full potential of our industries, forging powerful connections and tapping into a network of visionary change makers. Together, we can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the African Union's Agenda 2063, and the AFDB's Industrialize Africa. With focus, experience, creativity, and unwavering determination, we can accelerate Africa's shift towards green, inclusive, and sustainable industrialization.
A compelling vision for what will be the next 3 days and how we can work together to create the Africa, the prosperous Africa bedrock of our economies. Now, before we continue further, I'd like to share some house rules with you and give you further information. As you can see, the agenda was shown on the screen with the QR code, and you also have it on your seat to be able to follow all of the conversations that we'll be having. We also want to invite you to connect with us on the social media channels using the hashtag 2023AEC. And for those of you wishing to connect to the Wi-Fi networks, you will find on both sides of the room the access code. For the bathroom, it's outside to the left. Now, as we continue, we've seen it here, the 4 key themes that will be discussed over the next couple of days, and to give us our welcome address and set the foundation for what will be the next 3 days. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome to the podium the Minister of Industry for the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Minister Melaku Alibel. Let's give him a round of applause as he enters the stage.
Ms. Fatou Hydra, Deputy Director General and Director General Special Representative for Africa, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, all protocol observed. It gives me great honor and pleasure indeed to welcome you all to Ethiopia, the land of origin, and to Ethiopia's beacon of diplomacy, historical and vibrant city, Addis Ababa. On behalf of the Ethiopian government and its people, we are honored to host this crucial conference focusing on the imperative for sustainable industrial development in Africa. Your presence here symbolizes a united resolve to drive Africa's economic, social, and industrial prosperity. We are here to transform ambition into action, fostering a sustainable industrial development to advance our economies. We honor our forefathers' vision of industrial development as a key to sustainable growth. Our gathering here is a continuation of that legacy to unleash our industrial potential, enhancing productivity, modernizing technology, and creating jobs. There is an urgent need for Africa to rapidly diversify its economies and add value to everything that is produced. This is where the rationale of industrializing Africa rests. Aligned with this African Union Agenda 2063 and the UN's 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, our task is to wisely harness our rich natural resource for an innovative and industrial revolution. We aim to raise Africa's manufacturing GDP contribution significantly, a leap that would accelerate our progress towards both Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2063's targets. Honorable President, ladies and gentlemen, Ethiopia exemplifies this ambition with notable economic resilience and growth underpinned by our homegrown economic reform and 10-year development plan. This aims to elevate Ethiopia into a middle-income country by 2025, focusing on key sectors like agriculture, manufacturing industry, mining, tourism, and ICT. Ethiopia has sustained impressive consecutive economic growth, averaging 6.3 over the past 5 years. This growth reflects not only the resilience of the Ethiopian economy, but also the remarkable progress in agriculture and manufacturing. It underscores our determination to overcome adversity and drive economic development and agriculture transformation. Sustainable development and climate change are also the prior agendas that we are working on, and remarkable results have been achieved, including self-sufficiency in wheat production and planting over 32 billion seedlings through the Green Legacy Initiative. In the manufacturing sector, the Ethiopian Talent Movement, it is to mean the Let Ethiopia Produce or Made in Ethiopia initiative, is central to our reforms, symbolizing our commitment to self-reliance and industrial advancement. This initiative focuses on resolving manufacturing bottlenecks, boosting skill development, fostering entrepreneurship, decent work, and sparking innovation. Through strategic partnership, we aim to bridge developmental gaps and catalyze an economic reach in expertise and innovation. We are committed to enhance our manufacturing sector productivity. Our focus is on addressing challenges like input supply, financial access, and infrastructure development. Our industrial parks attracting foreign investment, and they are pivotal to this mission. As a result, the growth rate of manufacturing sector showing improvement. The market share of the local manufacturing product rose from 30% to 38%. Capacity utilization grows from 47% to 55.8%, and investment flow is increasing and it's promising. Yet we face challenges, including Africa's marginal presence in the global manufacturing arena and the imperative for economic diversification. Honorable President, ladies and gentlemen, the African Continental Free Trade Area presents a unique opportunity for integration and thus sustainable industrial development, making this conference a crucial platform for collective action. I urge you to turn our discussion into pragmatic, actionable policies. Let's craft data-driven recommendations for sustainable growth, for sustainable industrial growth. This is not merely an academic endeavor, but a practical one, aimed at impacting policies and practices across the continent. I extend my gratitude to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the African Development Bank, and the United Nations Development Programme for their support in organizing this conference. As we delve into our discussions, let's also take a moment to experience this rich culture and hospitality of Addis Ababa. Your commitment and to a sustainable and prosperous Africa is the driving force behind our shared goals. Together, let's make sustainable development a tangible reality. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Alibel. The call to action has been received. So let's turn these conversations into catalytic actions. Now that the foundation has been laid, it is now time for the opening remarks. And for that, I am very honored to welcome to stage Mr. Matthias Nab, Director for Regional Services Center at the Regional Bureau for Africa at the UNDP. Let's give him a warm round of applause.
Your Excellency, Honorable Ms. Salehwork Zoedi, President of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellency, Honorable Mr. Melaku Alibel, Minister of Industry, Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Dr. Clever Gatete, Executive Secretary, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Professor Kevin Uramo, Chief Economist and Vice President, Africa Development Bank, Ms. Fatu Haidera, Deputy Director General, Managing Director of the Directorate of Global Partnerships and External Relations, and Director General Special Representative for Africa, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. Esteemed leaders joining us remotely, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Ahuna Ezekwawa, Assistant Secretary General and Director of the Bureau for Africa, UNDP, would have loved to be here herself, but due to other pressing demands in New York requiring her presence, she's not able to be with us today, but she sends her greetings. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia for hosting the 2023 African Economic Conference. Thank you for your leadership. UNDP takes pride in being an integral part of the African Economic Conference. Since 2006, we have collaborated closely with the African Development Bank and the Economic Commission for Africa to bring the best of Africa's brains and thought leaders to identify solutions to accelerate the continent's socioeconomic transformation. We believe that there is power in homegrown solutions, and the AEC, as we call it, is a great way to harvest these ideas, but even more, to put them into action as part of our collective interventions. The theme of this conference couldn't be more timely. The imperative and centrality of Africa's industrial development has been brought front and center in recent years because of the lessons from the shocks that have troubled the globe. From the COVID-19 pandemic to the war in Ukraine, through to the climate emergency, it has become an existential necessity for Africa to industrialize. A lot has been done in setting the frameworks that can foster Africa's industrialization. Take the African Continental Free Trade, for example. We now know that thanks to this historic agreement, Africans can invest in industrial ventures with the certainty that there is supportive trade policy that will not discriminate against these products in both tariffs and non-tariff barriers. We also know that this will play a critical role in raising incomes and also to structurally transform the continent. There will also be a dividend in sustainable peace and security, especially in conflict-prone regions. Now is the time to invest in Africa's value addition because it is the only way that Africa will change the status quo, investing in these abundant raw materials and commodities that have transformed the economies of several advanced economies. And we must ensure that this value addition is also based on the regional value chains approach. This is because we need to ensure that Africa's industrialization brings along all the people, young and old alike, as well as women and men. We must also ensure that we keep all of the small and medium-sized enterprises in mind so that it is truly a democratizing process. UNDP is supporting African countries thanks to our presence in all African countries, working with governments to develop and implement policies for structural economic transformation. With specific regard to intra-African trade, we are invested working with sister agencies and the UN country teams in ensuring that the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks and our own UNDP country program documents identify trade, investment, and industry as critical levers for economic growth and sustainable development. Through evidence-based policies, UNDP continues to work closely with its partners to set the tone for the global discourse on industrialization in Africa. The 2021 Features Report, jointly co-published with the AFCFTA Secretariat, highlights the critical importance of maximizing Made in Africa revolution. The sectors identified as emerging include automobiles, lithium-ion batteries, leather and leather products, clothing and textiles, soya, cocoa, pharmaceuticals, vaccines, mobile financial services, and entertainment services. This revolution will need to be underpinned by investment ventures in goods and services that promote value addition and beneficiation. This information also helps businesses to know and make informed decisions on where to invest to harness the AFCFTA opportunities, thanks to the UNDP Africa Business Map and the SDG Investor Maps. UNDP is also proud to announce the Africa Buyers Program, launched on 9th November 2023, together with Afrexim Bank at the Intra-African Trade Fair. This platform offers tailored market information to identify where producers can source their inputs from within Africa, so that the industrial drive we all want to see benefits as many Africans enterprises as possible. And for us at UNDP, we want to ensure that such investments also go in the direction of accelerating the SDGs, which is why we are making available the intelligence in our SDG investor maps, so that choice can go into those areas that are better positioned to accelerate prosperity for all. Excellencies, driving Africa's industrial revolution requires new ideas. This is why inclusion of young African researchers at this conference is a testament to our commitment to harnessing their intellectual power. Youth are the industrialists of today and tomorrow, and we want to ensure that they lead the way in identifying pathways forward. Let me close off by sharing 4 ideas that we believe will give you a push to Africa's industrial development. First, on affordable and timely financial resources and investments, we need to foster mutually beneficial public-private partnerships that are committed to making in Africa. African governments have already done an important job in creating incentives for investment attraction. Now we need to ensure that the investors produce in Africa, but also that we close the tap on the hemorrhage that the continent faces from illicit financial flows, which go to the tune of up to $90 billion annually, money that should stay and deliver development in Africa. Second, financial inclusion is pivotal. The path to industrialization gains momentum when small and medium-sized enterprises and informal traders are equipped with the tools and support to create products and services needed within the AFCFTA framework. This is why UNDP and partners launched the AFCFTA initiative in April 2023 at the inaugural AFCFTA Business Forum. We are working collectively to galvanize momentum to strengthen export readiness for women-led enterprises. We need more of such initiatives. And third, it is imperative that we revitalize intra-African trade and production capacities by addressing both tariff and non-tariff barriers. We must break free from the reliance on the exportation of raw commodities and explore high-tech industries to diversify our economies. Finally, we will not succeed without sustained political commitment to industrial development. Now that the legal frameworks are in place, it is time to step up support for industrial action and bring the weight of political support to propel industrial action in Africa. I am optimistic about Africa and about its prospects. There is no better time to invest in Africa than now. I encourage Africa's businesses to make the necessary investments, governments to create the enabling environments, and international institutions must be open to listening to the voices of private sector and better understand how we can sharpen our efforts of support. I am looking forward to the deliberations, and I do hope that we leave this conference with a blueprint to take the continent on a successful path to industrial development. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nab. You have touched on quite a few elements that will be deliberated on in more details over the next couple of days, from how we can optimize our supply and value chains, all the way through to how we can harness the power of youth and women in the economy. Now, next up, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you our next speaker for the opening of remarks, Professor Kevin Urama, Chief Economist and Vice President of the African Development Bank Group. Let's give him a warm round of applause.
Your Excellency Ms. Sahle-Work Zewde, President of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Dr. Clever Getete, Executive Secretary, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, honorable ministers, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to stand on established protocols. I would like to first thank Her Excellency Ms. Sahle-Work Zewde, the President of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, for the wonderful welcome and for hosting us today in this beautiful and historic city of Addis Ababa. Thank you, Your Excellency. I bring you warm greetings from Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the President of the African Development Bank Group, who was unable to be here in person with us because of other commitments. On his behalf, I am pleased to welcome you to the 2023 African Economic Conference, AEC 2023, that is jointly organized with UNECA and UNDP. Your Excellencies, as we have already heard, the theme of this year's meeting and conference cannot be more timely and more apt. The events and the geopolitical tensions we've had, the changes in the global economic landscape we've seen, the disruptions of supply chains, the increasing calls for friendshoring and reshoring in trade, and also several challenges we've seen in global market trends has once more highlighted for us the need for strategic and sustainable industrial policies for countries and regions like Africa. The COVID-19 pandemic, as already highlighted by my brother, exposed for us the structural deficiencies in Africa's industrial sector. It amplified the risks associated with continued dependence on commodity trade and also on importing foreign manufactured and intermediate goods, which has been the bane of Africa's economy in recent decades. From food and medical supplies, vaccines, and other pharmaceuticals, many African countries struggled to cope with the disruptions in global supply chains caused by COVID-19 pandemic, the Russia's war in Ukraine, and other geopolitical tensions we have seen in recent decades. It is well known that deliberate strategies for sustainable industrialization and structural transformation are critical foundations for building economic resilience and creating wealth in economies everywhere. That is why we have chosen this topic, to focus on how Africa can understand this fact and increase the pace with which we implement the existing strategies and policies and agreements that are already reached in Africa, including the ACFTA and other industrial policies in countries to rapidly increase industrialization across the continent. Over the decades, Africa has embarked on several industrial policies and strategies and have seen some structural transformations and progress made in key sectors. And we've seen this in the growth of Africa's GDP, which has grown by 4.5% annually between the year 2000 and 2019, compared to other world averages, which was around 3.8% during that period. And even projections in the future show that Africa is the next growth pole for the world, only second in last year to Asia in terms of GDP growth. But notwithstanding all this pace in GDP growth, we have not seen industrialization and economic transformation at the same pace on the continent. With a development index of about 0.12 compared to 0.04 in Eastern Asia and 0.45 in Western Europe, Africa is the least industrialized continent in the world. Our manufacturing value added represented only 2.1% of the global manufacturing value added of the world over the years 2000 and 2021. And no wonder our increases in GDP growth is not leading to equivalent increases in job creation and poverty reduction on the continent. If you look at all the indicators of structural transformation and industrialization, Africa is not doing that very well. Asia, for example, has multiplied its contribution to global industrial production by 3.6 times during the same period, growing from 15% in 1970 to 54% in 2021. China has multiplied its own by more than 10 times during the same period, growing from 3% in 1993 to 31% in 2021. But on average, only 20% of Africa's exports in 2022 were made of manufactured goods. If you look at the rest of the world, over 75% of trade is actually in manufactured goods. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, despite this picture that calls for action for us to do more in accelerating industrialization on the continent, there are still a lot of progresses we have seen in several countries, including in Ethiopia, which we have already heard from our Honorable Minister here. According to the African Development Bank's Industrial Development Index, South Africa, Morocco, Egypt, Tunisia, Mauritius, Ethiopia, and several other countries have seen significant progress during the past decade. I would like to see our researchers understand why they have made these progresses and how this can be scaled to other countries around the continent. Your Excellencies, there are well-known bottlenecks that has been the bane of Africa's poor industrialization or lack of progress in terms of catching up with the rest of the other economies. Among that is inadequate investment in both hard and soft infrastructure. And that is why investing in infrastructure will continue to remain a central theme for the African Development Bank to help increasing factor productivity, reducing cost of production, and also the cost of trade between countries. There are huge investment gaps in this sector that we estimate to be up to $108 billion annually. Other factors include focus on commodity-led growth, high cost of capital that limits access to affordable finance, weak institutional governance, recurrent conflicts, and political instability, which foster high risk perceptions by potential investors, therefore limiting capital flows into this continent. High inflationary pressures and forest risks and other compounding effects of climate change and tightening global financial conditions also create a lot of debt vulnerabilities that limit the ability of countries to access capital required for growing industries on the continent. Your Excellencies, Africa still has huge opportunities to industrialize. This continent, 1.4 billion people, 17% of the global population, hosting 60% of remaining arable land in the world, 30 to 40% of world's deposit of green minerals, over 45% of technical potential in global technical potential in renewable energy in the world, could not be a better place to industrialize in the next decades than in Africa. I would therefore want to second the call that has been made by our colleague from the UNDP for African governments to show the political will in order to implement the existing policies and strategies already in several countries and at a continental level in order to leverage the huge opportunities we see in energy, estimated at 1.3 trillion market by 2030. In electric vehicles, we have all the minerals in many of the African countries, and this market will be worth about $7 trillion by 2025. 60% of agricultural land remaining in Africa means that Africa will define the future of food security in the world. So the best place to do agro-allied industrialization. And Africa's ICT industry is also growing very fast, from expected to rise speedily from $95.4 billion in 2020 as digitalization continued to take root in global markets. There are several other sectors and opportunities for industrialization to take roots in Africa. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by proposing actionable approaches to accelerate industrialization and structural transformation in Africa for our consideration during this conference. First, countries need to demonstrate strong political will. And I will repeat, strong political will, like we have seen in Ethiopia, in Morocco, in South Africa, and other countries that have been able to see transformation in their industrial sectors. We need that strong political will specifically for promoting industrial strategies and maintaining stable and predictable macroeconomic policy environments that will facilitate ease of entry and exit, and also safety of capital. Second, we need to develop and consistently implement strategic industrial policies that encourages local production and local domestic consumption, and also domestic and regional value chain development. Policies that have been tried and tested in several other regions, like local content policies and franchising, could offer us very low hanging fruits. Third, we need to develop and implement a national education and skills development strategy that is fully embedded in national industrial policy and development plans. Not education for certificates, but education for production and actually for adding value to our resources in Africa. Fourth, implement special economic zones, SEZs, to promote spillovers through clustering and agglomeration as key industrial policy instruments. Again, we've seen that a lot in agriculture in Ethiopia and in other sectors like automobiles and aeronautics in both Morocco, South Africa, and Egypt. Fifth, implement fiscal incentives that encourage intra and interregional trade and supply chain development in Africa, removing all the trade and non-trade tariffs that limit the flow of human capital and commodities between African countries. If you do an analysis on how the cost of trading between countries, even within the same region on the continent, is actually a lot easier to trade with external parties. And that is part of what is reducing our access to trade. And that includes Open Visa Index, which has been championed by the African Union and the African Development Bank Group. To succeed, African countries must think differently. I've just shown you how we have not transformed structurally since the 1960s. If you look at the indicators, the industrial progress has not changed significantly. So we need to adopt and implement transformative policy actions that accelerates endogenous manufacturing capacity and also encourages local consumption. We need to produce African and consume African, because it's only when that demand and supply of manufactured products meet that we can create equilibrium in our industrial sector markets. I look forward to insightful deliberations and to learning a lot from our young and brilliant researchers and vibrant academics and political leaders here from all countries across the continent on how we can change the status quo, accelerate industrialization, and structural transformation in Africa and improve the quality of lives of all Africans, because together we can. I look forward to this meeting coming up with a blueprint for industrialization in Africa, again, because together we can. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Asante sana. Amasignalo.
Thank you very much, Professor Orama. Together we can. African nations need to think differently. We need to produce African and consume African. Now, on the topic of industrialization, digitization, innovation, our next speaker joins us through the marvels of technology. It is my absolute honor to introduce to you Ms. Fatou Haidara, who is the Deputy Director General, Managing Director of the Directorate of Global Partnerships and External Relations, and Director General's Special Representative for Africa at UNIDO, as she gives us a virtual video address. Let's turn our eyes to the screen.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you so much for inviting UNIDO to address this important event. The theme, the imperatives for sustainable industrial development in Africa, is so relevant to our mandate. Inclusive, resilient, and sustainable industrialization is of critical importance for an integrated and prosperous Africa. The African continent has great untapped potential. A vast young population, a tremendous number of small and medium-sized enterprises, vast potential in wind, solar, hydro, and geothermal energy, more than any other continent, and not to forget, natural resources. Furthermore, the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area is a turning point for future development efforts. UNIDO and our partners are ready to seize this moment and to turn Made in Africa into a global symbol of progress. UNIDO has the technical know-how, implementation capacities, technology transfer platforms, and evidence-based solutions to help unlock Africa's potential. To answer to the many arising challenges, UNIDO formulated a new strategy for Africa to contribute effectively to the productive integration of the continent and to turn the opportunities of the African Continental Free Trade Area into reality. This being said, Africa's growth is contingent on large-scale strategic investments to achieve the goals set in the African Union Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Furthermore, local manufacturing capacities, inclusive access to global financial markets, sustainable value chains, and climate action are necessary preconditions for a prosperous Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, developing strong industrial systems requires evidence-based policies, strategies and norms that support resilient, sustainable, inclusive industrial growth. UNIDO is keen to step up its effort to support its African member states with capacity development, analysis, research, statistics, and evidence-based policy advice to shape tailored industrial strategies and policies. We must work to establish stronger public-private partnerships between governments and the business community, because the role of the private sector is crucial, considering the significant challenges of unemployment, especially amongst women and youth. The private sector can and must be part of the solution. Advancing our common agenda requires joint action, broad political and financial support, and strong global partnerships. I therefore appeal to you today to join forces in support of African countries and their inclusive and sustainable industrialization. I wish you successful deliberations and thank you for your attention. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you so much for inviting UNIDO to address this important event. The theme, the imperatives for sustainable industrial development in Africa, is so relevant to our mandate. Inclusive.
And now that the foundation has been laid for our first three opening remarks, we turn to a new beacon of leadership within UNECA. I believe this may be your first African Economic Conference since entering into this role. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Executive Secretary, Mr. Clave Gatete, as he comes to stage. Thank you.
Your Excellency Sahle-Work Zewde, President of the Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellency Miraku Arabel, Minister of Industry of Ethiopia, Honorable Ministers present, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It's my honor to welcome you all to this African Economic Conference 2023 under the theme, The Imperatives of Sustainable Industrial Development in Africa. Thank you, Mr. President, for gracing this event with your presence. I understand that you have been the force behind this conference since 2022 when you officially opened it. Thank you for your. I wish to express my sincere gratitude to all those who took time to attend this significant event, whether in person or virtually. Your presence here means a lot to us. I would also like to extend a heartfelt thank you to the government of Ethiopia for their unwavering support and to our partners, the Africa Development Bank and UNDP for their invaluable collaboration. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the context in which we convene this 18th session of the Africa Economic Conference is unprecedented and profoundly challenging. The triple crisis constituted by the COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the relentless impact of climate change have imposed multifaceted challenges upon our beloved continent. Africa's growth is expected to rebound to 4.1% in 2023, despite the slowdown to 3.6% in 2022, caused by global economic slowdown, inflationary pressures, climate change, and worsening international economic and financial conditions. While the increased frequency and intensity of shocks pose long-term risks, it presents an opportunity for Africa to adapt resilient strategies that will help it withstand future challenges. It is vital to discuss policies and institutional capacities for sustainable industrialization, inclusive development, and structural transformation. This will help us rebuild and emerge stronger from the crisis. The 18th session of the Africa Economic Conference has brought together leaders, youth, African scholars, academics, private sector operators, and development practitioners to discuss research and propose policy recommendations that will help African countries. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as the SDG target year 2030 approaches, member states must review progress made and identify the remaining tasks. You all agree with me that at the heart of our efforts to rescue the sustainable development goals and fulfill our commitment to the Africa we want lies our call for accelerated industrialization for sustainable and inclusive development. We envision a prosperous Africa with sustainable development and that maximizes opportunities for income growth, local employment, poverty reduction, and social development. Industrialization is the key to sustained growth and transformation, providing jobs, skills acquisition, innovation, and formal employment, especially for women and youth. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, effective governance and development planning are crucial for industrialization and structural transformation. National plans help countries prioritize development goals and meet international obligations. By developing risk-informed macroeconomic and sectoral strategies, we can build resilience into the planning framework while promoting growth and macroeconomic stability. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Africa's industrialization agenda focuses on regional integration, infrastructure development, and trade. The aspiration to create a united continent based on the ideas of Pan-Africanism and Africa's Renaissance is fueled by infrastructure development. By 2063, Africa aims to have a world-class infrastructure network to support growth, technology transformation, trade, and development. However, the current infrastructure gap poses a significant challenge to sustainable development, and there is a need to convert this constraint into an accelerator for industrialization and development. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's clear that addressing energy infrastructure gaps and rehabilitating aging rail networks are crucial for our development aspirations. However, the estimated need for financing and investment, which stands at around $170 billion annually, is a significant hurdle. Additionally, establishing new rail and road infrastructure is equally important in enabling intra-Africa trade and catalyzing industrialization. The good news is that the African Continental Free Trade Area has the potential to transform this situation. It can provide the necessary impetus to improve energy and infrastructure services required for industrialization while simultaneously creating new markets for trade, innovation, and development. We understand that implementing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is a crucial step for member states. That's why Economic Commission for Africa is committed to supporting countries and regional economic communities to develop national and regional implementation strategies. These strategies serve as a guide, helping nations to fully integrate the agreement into the national priorities and identify areas of competitive and comparative advantage. Our aim is to make this process as smooth as possible so that everyone can benefit from the opportunities presented by the African Continental Free Trade Area. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we embark on this conference, our collective objective is to accelerate sustainable industrialization in Africa through robust discussions and evidence-based recommendations. The Ethiopian Minister of Industry said it loud and clear. We need to add value on everything that we produce. I trust that the rich exchanges of ideas, valuable insights, and innovative solutions will mark the coming days. As I conclude, allow me to extend my best wishes to you for productive deliberations and an enjoyable stay in this beautiful city of Addis Ababa. I thank you for your kind attention.
And now for a moment of great significance. Please join me in welcoming to stage Her Excellency, President of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Sahle-Work Zewde, to officially open our conference.
Morning to you all. Minister Malako Alebel, the Executive Secretary of the ECA, Dr. Claver Gatete, the Director General Services Center, UNDP, the Chief Economist and Vice President of the African Development Bank, the Deputy Director General of UNIDO, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs. Let me start by congratulating Dr. Claver Gatete for having been appointed as the new Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. I have pleasure to welcoming you to Ethiopia. I wish you a successful tour of duty and assure you of Ethiopia's support while you fulfill your mandate. I would like also to thank the ECA, the ADB, and UNDP for convening this very important conference. And thank you for inviting me to deliver this statement. The issue that brings us all here today is of utmost importance for Africa. The previous speakers have elaborated on it. We are here with a collective dedication to advance inclusive and sustainable industrial development and to make good use of this remarkable platform with very knowledgeable participants. This platform will allow participants to pinpoint inventive solutions, play a role in fostering equitable globalization, and cultivate meaningful partnerships. This conference is happening at a very critical time, where a review of the implementation of the SDGs has been done recently on the margins of the last General Assembly of the United Nations. And I would like to use the word that the Executive Secretary just mentioned, where there is a need to really rescue the SDGs. And also our continental roadmap, the Agenda 2063 for the Africa we want. So it's not just an alarm clock, really, but it's a real call, not for action, to redouble action. It's a critical time. I don't think we have any other option. Much has been said, as I mentioned earlier by previous speakers. I don't want to repeat. I've been adjusting my speeches according to what they said, not to repeat the same thing. But let me just highlight three key areas that I think we need to focus on, among others. First, it is increasingly evident that industrial development is not a luxury, but an essential component for our sustained and inclusive economic growth. There is a misunderstanding when we talk about industrialization that actually it might not be for Africa, it's something much bigger than we can grasp, which is not the case. So it's really, therefore, essential that we build a robust industrial sector that can withstand external shocks, investing in our manufacturing industries and cultivating industrial capabilities through intentional efforts towards import substitution and export-oriented industrialization. And that is really crucial. The lessons learned over the past 3 years highlight the unreliability as well as vulnerability of global production and value chains to various shocks. Relying solely on foreign manufacturers poses risks, making it both prudent and necessary to explore diverse options. Therefore, it is now a crucial time to adopt more efficient strategies for import substitution, industrialization, economic diversification, and the development of internationally competitive manufacturing sectors. The second point I wanted to raise is the need to really critically look at our development plans and especially our industrial policies based on what should exist, really, a political will. There is nothing that can be done. It has been said by all speakers. Political will is at the heart of what we do. They must address these policies and plans, the emergent trends and challenges that are continuously reshaping our continent and the unforeseen gaps that require policy reforms. Our policies must incorporate updated tools and context that take into consideration recent phenomena requiring technology adaptation and application. Our policy frameworks at every level should also emphasize the basic principles that focus on supporting domestic industrial developments, as well as promote improved productivity and competitiveness. The third point is the need for changing the narrative of Africa's industrialization through inclusive and sustainable industrial development. Social inclusion in the production sector, as well as shared benefits from industrial growth, are foundation for a prosperous Africa. No one should be left behind, both in the making and in the sharing of resources. Therefore, government institutions and structures must ensure that public policies, strategies, and national plans are gender sensitive. In this regard, building capacities in public and private small and medium enterprises and entrepreneurship development is indeed vital. As we all know, SMEs are key to the development of Africa's private sector, and SMEs are really needed, in particular in the agricultural sector. But none of these efforts will bear fruit if we do not address the main obstacles to the development of any sector, and that is the climate change, political instability, armed conflicts, to name but a few, which can be destructive, not only affecting economic growth in general, but the human capital, and poses significant threat to economic and social development. As I conclude, allow me to add one last point. As you know, some terms, words appear at a certain point of time and are used extensively and disappear as if they have never existed. I think it's very important not to be seen as having buzzwords, but these are essential in our life. Sustainability and inclusivity are essential. It has to be unpacked, well clarified, well defined, and embraced by everyone. It's not a matter of fashion. It's a critical concept that is not just for now, but that concerns generations to come, without, of course, compromising their own needs and aspirations. I would like to wish you a successful conference. Please enjoy your stay in Addis Ababa. Je souhaite plein succès à la conférence 2023, à la conférence économique africaine sur les impératifs du développement industriel durable en Afrique. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Amasa Ganada.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We would now like to invite Your Excellency as well as dignitaries to take the family photo in the hallway downstairs. You will be escorted by members of protocol as to where you should be. So they will take you there now. We would like to ask everybody else in the room to remain seating and to remain in the room as we will be proceeding with the rest of the program.